All right. Welcome back to Word of Mouth. Dr. John Porterfield, thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for feeding me dinner, having me in your house.
Absolutely. Cassie made us some spaghetti tonight.
For our listeners, a couple weeks ago, I had on my little sister, Chloe, with her friend Natalie and her friend Anna. And now I'm with Natalie's dad.
Full circle.
Yeah. So I think I need to try and track down JP and just start making my rounds with the Porterfields.
Absolutely. He used to do casting for esports.
Yeah.
And so he got all into the microphones and headphones and audio quality, and he got really good at it.
That's pretty cool. It's pretty niche.
Yeah.
I'd love to chat with him about that. So Dr. John Porterfield, typically we ask our guests to tell us about themselves because we're always curious. I like to ask people the question, what do I need to know about you? Because it kind of throws people off, but it's the same thing as just like, tell me about yourself. So John, what do we need to know about you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love asking people that in interviews or things. I would typically say that, I grew up on a farm in South Alabama. My dad had grown up on that farm. That land had been in our family since Andrew Jackson signed some of the original deeds, and he became an endodontist. My mom was a nutritionist, dietitian, and so grew up down there, went to high school in Montgomery, and then went on to Auburn for undergrad, UAB for medical school, and then ended up back here in Birmingham at UAB as a surgeon. And along the way, I met Cassie whenever I was in 7th grade, and she was in 6th grade. And so
it's a little while ago.
So 1987. And so she and I have been best friends ever since. We've been married now for 27 years, and we've got 3 beautiful children that have gone on to be successful in very different ways. Come on.
I love it. Well, I'd love to learn a little bit more about first your childhood.
Yeah.
So growing up on a farm, do you have siblings?
I have one older sister, Victoria.
Okay.
Yep, she's 5 years older.
Y'all close?
We are.
Y'all still spend time together? She's still around here?
Yeah, she's in Marietta, and I stayed at their house last Thursday.
Nice.
Yep.
Awesome. And then the farm that y'all go to all the time, that's your parents' farm, I assume?
That's right.
Gotcha. Did y'all like raise cattle or grow farm crops? Yeah. Like what kind of farm did y'all have?
Yeah, the farm's interesting. Back in from the Great Depression on up into the 60s and 70s, it was what was considered like a cash row crop farm with corn and soybeans and cotton and peanuts, and the soil is really fertile. You could grow pretty much any vegetable. And then that turned into a cattle farm in the mid 70s, late 80s. And my dad always said that, he figured out that the best way to lose money was with cows, because you could buy when the prices were high and you could sell when the prices were low, and you could lose a bunch of money with cows. And so mid 80s, it transitioned into a timber farm. The stock market was doing well. Dad's always been like a hobby trader. And he saw the opportunity for investing in basically converting it into a pine forest. So we only plant about 100 acres a year now, and that's mostly for wildlife, not for harvest. And so the farm is really for, recreation, from hunting and fishing and having time for our family to be together is usually what it has evolved into.
Yeah. So what'd you spend your time doing when you were a kid? Were you out in the land all the time, running around outside?
Yeah, when you live on a farm, there's always something that breaks. There's always something that happens, and so I loved the new challenges. It was always something different. It'd be a thunderstorm. It'd be 2:00 in the morning, and a cow would run through a fence and hit a car, and then you needed to deal with the person's car and the cow and the fence, and who knows? It was always raining when cows did bad things, or it was equipment. There are unimaginable ways that men working on the farm can break equipment. And so I that's where kind of working with my hands and fixing things that eventually led towards surgery was working with the men. Many of them didn't read or write. They would sign their name with an X, but they were just masterful mechanics and technicians to repair, these big diesel tractors and engines and stuff that we worked with.
Yeah, that's cool. So how did you end up going to medical school? Because, I don't know, to me, the path from farm boy to medical school doesn't necessarily seem like there's a lot of overlap, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Along there, along with working on the farm, it was also not just the livestock, but it was also the hunting and fishing. And so whenever we would, be cleaning a deer or something like that, I had my dad that was right there with me. And so he understood all the chambers of the heart, and he understood the kidney and how it filtered blood and the intestines and how they worked. And so it was always a little bit of a science project. It was more than just, converting the animal into food that our family could eat. It was more about like, what could he teach me and what could I learn from it? And that understanding of how God made the human body and how he made the organs that we were looking at in these deer or turkeys or whatever. And then being able to think about how that might apply in my career. And I'll never forget it. It was just a most crystal clear moment when I decided I wanted to go to medical school. And that was, we were in the Atlanta airport. I was walking with mom and dad. We were on a trip, and a patient came up to my dad, and they just raved about how he was so wonderful that he took away their pain because he had done a root canal on them. And that guy looked at me and he said, if your dad ever misses something that's important to you, he's helping people and it matters. And that clicked in my head, and I was like, I want to be able to give that to people, what my dad was doing.
Yeah, that's really special.
Yep.
Did you do sports and things like that growing up?
Yeah, I was a little bit of that loner kid that didn't play the team sports because mom and dad discouraged me from team sports because it would have put me on teams that would have competed on the weekends and things like that. And so I wouldn't have been at the farm as much. So I picked up racquetball whenever I was in 4th grade, and that turned into like a club sport that allowed me to do that all through high school. And I got to play in the national championships, 5 years in a row. I reached 3rd place in the nation in 16 years and under. So I got to play it at a high level, but none of my classmates, nobody knew like what's racquetball.
Yeah.
And then that switched over to golf, which turned into a sport that I've used in my career, and it's been a really good thing. So everything's been about more the individual sports.
Yeah. When did running come onto the radar?
Running's always been around me. My dad would come home, he'd run a mile almost every day. Cassie, she ran for as long as I've known her. She would always run. And so I would run a little bit. But I met a guy named David Corey. Cassie and I were at a marriage retreat, and David and I were just laughing and talking about stuff. And he was like, he couldn't believe that I'd never run a marathon or I'd never run. And he's like, oh man, you'll love it. We'll come back after this retreat and we'll go run for 3 or 4 hours and you'll love it. And I was like, 3 or 4 hours? You are crazy.
It's a long time to run.
Yeah. And so our first run was in Oak Mountain State Park. We went out and ran like 8 or 10 miles. We kind of got lost. We made our way back. He remembered it a little bit from when he was at Sanford. And I was in 2015. And then, I never ran a marathon. We just went out and ran a 50K. And,
wow. A heck of a first race.
Yeah. And so then we got on this trail of running the Southeastern Trail Series with David Tosh and Todd Henderson with their races. And it's been fun to put, 4 to 8 races a year on the calendar.
Yeah. That's cool. So getting through high school into college, you went to Auburn. Mm-hmm. Did you know that you wanted to go to medical school going into college, or how was that? What were you thinking going to college?
Yeah, I was probably 95% medical school, probably 5% dental school.
Okay.
I'd had a lot of people tell me, your dad has a really successful practice. You should come back and take over his practice.
And And remind me what he was doing again.
He's an endodontist.
Okay. So dental surgeon.
Dental surgeon, yeah, doing
Basically.
root canals.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would basically do 8 root canals, 4.5 days a week, had a great practice, owned his own practice. A lot of good things about that. And I really admire him for not encouraging me to do that, because he realized that was right for him, but he saw that, he thought I would thrive in a bigger team, in a hospital, whether it's a trauma setting or whether it's an operative setting or something. And I think he was very wise in how he advised me to do that.
Yeah. So you knew Cassie from childhood.
Yep.
Did y'all go to school together, undergrad?
We never did. She went to Jeff Davis in Montgomery, and I went to Trinity.
Okay.
So we were at 2 different schools, but we met because my sister dated her brother.
Okay.
Whenever they were seniors in high school.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Did y'all go to Auburn together?
No. She went to
So still didn't go to school together?
No, still didn't go to school together. I went to Auburn. She was a year younger.
Okay.
And so when I was starting my second year at Auburn, she went to the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And she was there for a year. And I always say it's before she saw the light.
Yeah.
And she went to Samford to pursue her degree in piano performance.
Okay. Gotcha. And then what did you study at Auburn?
So I studied zoology, which is study of animals.
Yeah.
It's really, in so many ways, the study of evolution. So growing up as a creationist, it was really interesting, and I really enjoyed learning about, what I had not been taught in a private Christian school about evolution and that type of thing. And so it was a really good major. I had enough credits to get a minor in chemistry, but Auburn wouldn't let you have a minor in chemistry.
Okay.
In the School of Math and Science at the time, because I loved chemistry, I loved zoology, and then I was very well prepared for medical school. Much of my 5th year at Auburn, I did do 5 years. That was strategic. I enjoyed it. I got every bit I could out of the 5 football seasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, my 5th year at Auburn, those science classes were as hard, if not more difficult, than med school.
Yeah. So zoology, I assume there's a lot of science classes and things like that. So that kind of prepares you for medical school, presumably.
Yeah, and I guess it's less the content that you learn, but
Okay.
it's more just the rigor of having to do a year of inorganic chemistry and a year of organic chemistry, and having to fight through physics and calculus and things like that at a large state school where you do feel a little bit more like a number.
Yep.
And it's a weed out process for sure. And then they don't really care. I mean, they know certain groups going to get weeded out and they're going to go do something else. And I think that's built into the process, whether it's intentional or unintentional, but you definitely feel like you start to see classmates kind of drop off.
Yeah. Was getting into medical school easy?
It was easy the 3rd time, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first 2 times I applied to medical school, the first time I applied for an early acceptance program, which was a really dumb decision. I was nowhere near the caliber of applicant that would have gotten in, but I didn't know any better. The second year, I actually did worse on the MCAT. So I actually dropped a point, which, pretty much disqualified me right there.
Okay.
And then I sat down with George Hand, who was the director of admissions at UAB, where I eventually matriculated, and I so appreciated his honesty of just saying, John, this is what you've got to do. And he gave me a number on the MCAT that I had to hit. And he said, you have to get a 4.0 and a master's degree in 1 year. And I didn't know you could get a master's degree in 1 year. Mm. And he picked up the phone, he called the School of Medicine, and literally in my meeting, he got me accepted into the School of Public Health. He got me admitted to the School of Public Health, while I was sitting in his office. And there was no time to think about it.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I got a degree in epidemiology in a year.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 years of coursework, 1 year, didn't make any B's. And he was a man of his word, and he advocated for me in the admissions committee, and I got in.
For those uneducated, unlike me, what is epidemiology?
Yeah, it's neat. I did it because Dr. Hand told me to do it. And that was the next step to get in med school. I had no idea how much I would actually use epidemiology because it's the study of diseases in populations.
Okay.
Right. So you can think about like 2020 with COVID.
Yeah.
Right. Epidemiologists really were in the forefront of how are we going to study this disease as it moves across different populations. So that's what it was all about.
Okay. So do that, then you get into medical school.
Yep.
Talk me through that. What is medical school like here? UAB, right?
Correct.
Talk me through that.
Yeah. So UAB has a really different curriculum now. Back then, it was much more like an undergraduate coursework where you would take basically a certain number of hours of classes. So the fall was anatomy, and each class kind of stood on its own, very similar to college. Attendance was optional.
Really?
Yeah. So completely optional. Everything was judged on your performance on the labs and examinations and things like that. So I've never been a morning person. It's kind of funny. I turned into a surgeon, and most surgeons are morning people. But, Cassie would like kick me out of the bed to go to school, but I did stay up late studying. Had a great group of guys that I studied with. There were 6 of us. Oddly enough, all of us had gotten in on our second or third attempt.
Yeah.
And we were all newly married at the time, and we stuck together like brothers. And
that's pretty sick.
We helped each other, and it was amazing to see how many different things happened in each other's lives to put us in the same class. And we all pulled each other, we all pushed each other at different times, and it was a neat group to train with.
That's awesome. So you said you and Cassie were newly married at that point. Mm-hmm. Where in this timeline do you guys get married?
So our parents wouldn't let us get married until we both graduated from college.
Okay.
So that was June 14th of 1997. I asked her to marry me the September before, and then it was right after she graduated from Samford.
Yeah. So did she work while you did medical school, I assume, or what was that like?
Yeah, she did work, but she also was getting her master's in piano performance and pedagogy at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
Okay, gotcha. So medical school, UAB. I know from your LinkedIn you end up at Mayo Clinic.
Yeah.
How walk me through that process.
Yeah, that was it's so interesting how all that came about because you take a guy that he takes him 3 years to get in med school, and I wasn't number one in my class, coming out of med school. I'd done well on the test and things like that, so I was kind of a maybe a little above average, but not much above average for the applicants. And I was looking at residency programs, so I'd applied to around 30 programs. I'd gotten 15 interviews, and I'd selected 11 to go interview at. And I'd scheduled my Mayo Clinic and my Washington University in St. Louis. I'd scheduled those two first because I thought there's no way I'd ever get in either place, nor would I ever want to live in St. Louis or Rochester, Minnesota.
Yeah. I assume those are two very elite schools?
Yeah, very elite programs. They're large programs, and they're just, top 10, top 15 residency programs in the country. So I go to Mayo. It's my first interview. I'm unprepared. I haven't done my due diligence to study about the Mayo Clinic. I almost booked my tickets to Rochester, New York because I didn't know Rochester, Minnesota existed.
Yeah.
That's how just, uninformed I was. I went up there. I had the most amazing time. One of the things that we chose where to interview was whenever I asked the program director or whenever I asked the program coordinator, I was like, my wife is going to be coming with me. Do you have any activities for my wife while I'm there? And the programs that ignored that and said, nah, we don't do much with spouses. I did an interview at those places.
Yeah.
And Judy Cook was the coordinator there. And Judy said, oh, absolutely. We're going to get you with Dawn and Sonia Yarbrough, and she's going to have a whole play date. And they set up an entire day for Cassie.
That's awesome.
So we get back to the hotel that night after the interviews, and she's telling me how awesome it was, and I'm telling her how great it was. And I remember being so sad that I hadn't like prepared. I didn't feel like I had the right answers. And she was so sweet and kind. She said, John, this might be your best interview because you were just you.
Yeah.
Weren't trying to impress anybody. Didn't think I had a snowball's chance of getting in, the Mayo Clinic. And then one last part of that story was when it all came around to the rank list, I ranked Mayo number 1. And one of my classmates, Thielen Price, here in Birmingham, they called her name out first, and she matched at Mayo. And so I just hung my head because I was like, there's no way they're going to take 2 people from the same med school.
Yeah.
Because it's only going to take 10 that year from 1,100 applicants that they had. And I was like, there's no way. And so I hung my head. And when they called my name and I opened my envelope and I had matched there, it was pretty special. And I was so distracted that when I talked to my sister and I told Victoria, I was like, she's like, where'd you match? And I said 3 little letters, MAYO.
Yeah.
And that's always been the joke on me that, I never thought I'd get in. And then I went up there and just had a fabulous time training. It's a really special place for patients.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where along the line did kids come along?
Yes, kids came along. John came along. He was born during my 3rd year.
Okay.
So first 2 years are kind of books and classroom. Then your 3rd and 4th year, you're in the hospital. So John was born in February of my 3rd year. I was finishing up my last rotations, and then I was going through the interview season. So we took John. I think John did like 28 flights before he was 2.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we took him everywhere. My mom was awesome. She went with us on so many of these trips so that Cassie could be there and meet the other spouses of the residents. Hallie came along December of my intern year. Your intern year of surgical residency is it's the most unpredictable. It's the trial by fire. They fired one of my classmates that year. So it's just a busy time. So paternal leave wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
I think I was off work for about 8 or 10 hours.
That's crazy.
While I was there with Cassie. Hallie's born, and then went back to work and rounded the next morning.
That's crazy.
Yeah. My classmates were awesome. They helped me with some time off and stuff like that. But from the program standpoint, back in 2002, 2003, there were no duty hour regulations hadn't come into play and things like that. And had they offered me time off, I probably wouldn't have taken it. I was just I was
curious what you think about that, because I've heard mixed reviews from either friends in medical school or just doctors I've heard talk about it, like whether or not it's good or bad that people have to work like 24-hour shifts and things like that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think whether it's good or bad, I don't know. I definitely think it was the right thing to make a change, but to standardize things, because you can't sit there and say that you're as good after being up for 36 or 40 hours as you would otherwise be. That does have downsides in that surgical residents now, or any type of medical resident, they see less volume. They see a lower volume of patients. They see a lower volume of cases. And so I think that most residency programs have come up with a good balance now of how to properly provide enough experience, but not do it in a way that, causes the exhaustion that we know from some famous cases has led to some really tragic decisions and mistakes.
Yeah. What's the decision-making process like with your wife when y'all are trying to have kids while you're in medical school? Because that seems, I'm kind of watching that with some of my friends like Whit. Yeah. Like they're trying to time it just right for the gap when he has like less work and things like that. What was that process like for y'all?
Well, quite candidly, I don't think there was much discussion or planning or timing to that. Yeah, I think
that's fair.
Yeah, I think I was studying for step 2, trying to do my best, and I don't think I was studying a whole lot. And that was John, and then with Hallie, that was probably a lot of traveling and interviews.
Yeah,
and then Natalie, Natalie was born during my 4th year, and life at that point was so incredibly crazy with John and Hallie, the older kids. We were coming off of a miscarriage. Cassie's dad had passed away. just chaos.
Yeah.
I'm trying to finish residency program. We don't know where we're going to live.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. And so Natalie was, she was definitely the calmest of all. You might have picked up on that on the podcast.
Yeah.
But, yeah, she came into the world just as quietly as she could be. And we were very fortunate that she didn't add a lot of drama.
Yeah.
She made up for it a little bit later, but
yeah.
And, as all the kids have done, but, yeah, I don't remember us ever sitting around and thinking, let's have kids.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been ready.
Yeah, that's fair. I've heard that you're never ready. I mean, I wouldn't know yet, but
yeah,
I don't feel ready. So maybe I'm about to have a kid. I don't know. Okay, so kids come along. So you have all three of them before you finish school.
Correct.
Is Cassie working through that time, or is she just? I mean, having 3 kids is a lot.
Yeah, having 3 kids is a lot. No, she was not working at that time. We took out loans. So we took out roughly $25,000 a year for med school, and then I was providing a service, some offsite backup for dental X-rays and dental records, and so I was getting some income from that, and so between my income from kind of my side hustle and then my income from UAB was what we lived off of. Our parents helped us. They helped us with a down payment on our first house in Homewood during med school. And then we were able to make more than I ever dreamed on that, selling it.
Yeah,
you know?
I was going to say, depending on the timing of that.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I mean, that house was like $100,000 house, and we sold it for like $160,000, and it's over $1 million now.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy.
So so anyway, we got the benefit of that, and that allowed us to buy a house in Minnesota.
Yeah. So finished school, moved back to Birmingham, or?
Yeah, that was an interesting chapter for us for sure. Cassie was really happy in Minnesota. I was really happy up there. My primary mentor at MAYO was Clive Grant. He was the endocrine surgery fellowship director, and I guess I have to back up just a little bit. So when I went to MAYO, I went up there to be a heart surgeon and loved everything about hearts. Had a crisis during my 3rd year whenever I realized that if I kept pursuing hearts, I might give up my family because I wasn't going home.
Yeah.
Because as a 3rd, 4th year resident on the cardiac services, if you were there in the middle of the night, it was just you and a fellow, right? And putting a patient on full bypass and operating on a heart without your boss there, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But I was also falling in love at that time with surgical education, and I wanted to run a residency program like my program director, David Farley, and Marshall Uris here at UAB. That's who I wanted to be like. And there were no cardiac surgeons. There were also residency program directors at the time. So then I'm on Clive Grant's service. He's an endocrine surgeon, and he wasn't missing his kids' birthdays. He was at violin recitals. He was coaching baseball. He was there for his kids. He's only been married to Karen, right? He kept his first wife, like we were talking about.
Yeah, major key
to life. And so I wanted to be him. I wanted to take over his practice. I was the first endocrine surgery fellow at MAYO. Dr. Grant and I had talked about me basically. As he retired, I would have his administrative assistant. I would work with his nurse. And it was December of my fellowship year, which is really late. Like, you better have a job by Christmas of your last year. And I went and sat down and talked with Dr. Grant and said, or the night before, Cassie said, all the things you did with your dad growing up, you're not going to do those things with your kids. Like, you're not going to fish in a farm pond for bass. You're going to fish through an ice hole and catch walleye. And I asked her, I said, does that mean that we can move back to Alabama? And she said, it might be hard, but I think that's the right thing for our family. And so I walked in and I told Dr. Grant that I wasn't going to take the job at MAYO, which they had offered me. And so then I asked Dr. Grant that next morning, I said, Dr. Grant, I'm not staying. And he said, well, I need to get to work. What he meant was he needed to make phone calls. And within a week or two, I had interviews at Mayo Jacksonville. I had interviews here at UAB and other programs across the South. And Kirby Bland offered me the ideal job here in Birmingham to come back. And I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else.
That's awesome. Close to family, I assume.
Yep.
Both of your wife and your parents are still down here.
That's
I assume.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
And really, one of my mentors, Robert Serfolio, he encouraged me because he said at UAB, you'll be able to innovate, you'll be able to lead, you'll be able to be on the cutting edge of things. They won't hold you back with red tape and that type of thing. That's certainly been true in my career.
Yeah. I'd love to delve into that more.
Yeah.
Innovating how? Inventing technology, new techniques, like what does that look like in your job?
Yeah, I had no idea whenever I started at UAB, I had no idea what I would innovate on. There's one of the grand rounds at Mayo where they invite a recent graduate back to give a talk, and that talk is really similar every year. It's what did you learn that after you left Mayo that you didn't learn? And they invited me after I'd been out for 3 or 4 years to give that talk because within my first year, I began to push the envelope with Dr. Mary Hahn with like trying to operate through the mouth, which was called NOTES, natural orifice surgery. So we would take a scope, we would run it through the mouth and try to take the gallbladder out. We were using pig and dog models then. But then I transitioned into doing laparoscopic surgery through just one incision. So it was called single incision laparoscopic surgery, where we'd make one tiny incision at the belly button. We would cram 4 instruments all through there, and through this twisted way, we would work inside. So a patient could have, quote, scarless surgery. We did that for several years until I got introduced to the surgical robot. That Intuitive Surgical made the Da Vinci robot, and then through training and understanding how that device worked, that was really where the innovation began to take off. And it wasn't so much on the device side. It was more on the side of how do we safely teach the surgical residents, and then how do we accelerate that so that we can teach them at a very early age in training so that we have a full 5 years to train. And I impressed that because the first time I did a robotic case, I went to Atlanta and I operated in a lab for 8 hours on a cadaver, and then the next day I operated for about 6 or 8 hours on a live pig. So 2 days, and then I went back and operated on a human.
Wow.
I think that's crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Right. That's absolutely crazy. And so now our residents will do hundreds of cases over 5 years with us right there by their side, teaching them each step, so that I'm confident that when they go out into practice, it's not like they had 2 days. It's like being at a Holiday Inn or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they had a full curriculum experience all through residency, so they can go out prepared to safely, operate.
Do you find that you have a lot of colleagues who are interested in trying to push forward and push the limits and change how things work and innovate, or do you think you're more unique in that?
I think that my character. I've always been visionary. I've always tried to be an early adopter on most things, particularly in technology. My parents were like, I had computers before my classmates whenever I was in, 3rd, 4th grade. Nobody had little Radio Shack color computer 2s. I had my Uncle Ben that was always kind of feeding me technology. And so I never was afraid of it. I think I understood it better than most of my peers. And so it's always fostered that early adopter mentality.
Has that ever come to bite you in the butt?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely been, some leap before you look, in some different scenarios and things like that, that you can get burned. Probably done that more investing than anything else.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for kind of a new idea when it comes to markets or, currency pairs or, day trading and options and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. I do want to get to business stuff, but I kind of wanted to walk through kids growing up first.
Oh, yeah.
So being a dad, being a surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
but you chose the path where you could spend time with your kids, right? What where do you draw the line? Like, where do you draw the line between investing a lot where you're working, but wanting to spend a lot of time with your family?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think there is a line. I've always pushed back. It seems like it's gone out of favor recently, but people talking about this work-life balance kind of idea, I really don't think there is much of a balance.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's kind of everything all the time, everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's just got to be fully integrated.
Yeah.
Cassie's done such an amazing job. Like, she was worried about me being a surgeon and not seeing our kids. The entire first year of my residency, she brought John to the hospital every single day.
That's awesome.
Incredible. I mean, sometimes literally I would see them for 5 or 10 minutes. I would just walk down to the courtyard. She always told John that he was going to the park.
Yeah.
And one time we were at a park and he asked, like, where are all the poles? Where are all the people with the poles?
Yeah.
And we didn't know what he was talking about, but he was talking about IV poles because we were at a park that wasn't the hospital.
Yeah.
And he thought everybody at the hospital, he thought everybody at the park had an IV pole. So she did a great job with John, Hallie, and Natalie with bringing them up to the hospital. We haven't separated the hospital. I mean, sitting, right there at the dinner table, if the phone rings, they'll hear me talking to the hospital. They'll hear me talking to a patient. So I think it's been integrated. John has helped me on the technology side with how I've got my setup for telemedicine that I do for my clinics. Hallie has worked at the hospital with me. Natalie has been right there with me, helping me with some of the graphic design and some of my presentations. And so I really feel like the whole family has done surgery in a lot of ways.
That's really cool. Did any of your kids take after you and going into medicine?
Hallie's headed that way. She's studying for the MCAT now. John thinks that what I did for residency is just completely moronic.
Yeah.
He would never in a million years go to med school because he remembers it. The girls don't remember. They remember the great times, maybe later in training, but John remembers most of it. And then Natalie wants to build houses for doctors.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Did you ever want your kids to go into medicine?
No, I don't think there was. I guess what I told the kids, which is not good advice. So dads, don't do this. But I always told my kids they could do whatever they wanted after they got their doctorate. So because Cassie and I are so performance driven, with her being a concert pianist, both of us being athletes, me being a surgeon, the kids will all tell you that we pushed them really hard on performance and particularly in academics. And I think we backed off on John just in time, you know, and Hallie's taking her path toward med school and Natalie's doing her thing with architecture at Sanford. And so I think over the last probably 5 years, we've been healthier parents in how to, be there as a consultant for the kids. But that's where Cassie and I've learned a lot, to not put it too far out there for them.
Yeah. Why do you choose to do hard things?
I think that's where, you're alive, right? Like you just ran a marathon this weekend, and like when it really gets hard, that's whenever we can really test yourself and understand where your limits are. That's where failure occurs. I've never been afraid of failure. I think that's one of probably the greatest gifts Mom and Dad both instilled in me was to not be afraid to fail. Not that I wasn't punished when I failed, like if I broke a rule or got in trouble and that type of thing. But they definitely imparted to me the value in being able to push really hard.
How do you encourage your kids to push through failure? And did you try to teach them the same thing, to not be afraid of failure?
Yeah. I think they would probably say the same thing. It's in the hardest times we have said, what's the next right thing? And sometimes in a race, like it might just be the next step, just getting you one step closer to that finish line, to really simplify what the problems are and what can you do about it right now. To de-emphasize looking at the past of like what got you there, right? You should learn from those failures and that type of thing, but you certainly in the moments you can't dwell on it. Like if your last mile was really slow, sitting there beating yourself up about that last mile is not going to make the next one any faster.
Yeah.
So that's been key. And I think that, as a Christian, I think that your relationship with the Lord really kind of gives great guidance in all areas of life. But when it's really hard and He's all you got, then, that's whenever you really understand, like, what are your priorities, because you get back to what really matters in life.
Yeah. What do you think motivates you?
Oh, it's a good question. I love asking that question. I think that, on the career side, what motivates me the most is being able to see like the most patients receive like the best care, right? So it's that ripple effect. So it's that one little pebble and then all the ripples go across the pond. So from a career standpoint, that motivates me. And similarly in my family, I want to be able to, set the kids up in a way that they're able to have an impact and leave a legacy that's meaningful. And so I guess if it all boiled down to it, I think at the end of life, like what motivates me is I want to hear well done. Like with the talents I've been given, the resources I've been given, I want to hear well done. I want people to be proud that they helped me get to where I am. And I've had a lot of just amazing, great people over the years that some have already passed away, but yet I want them to be proud.
How did you find people along the way who would help you achieve the things that you wanted to do? Yeah,
I don't know that I actually did much of actually finding them. It's a really humbling question, and to acknowledge the fact that I don't think there's really anything that I did right that allowed me to find them, other than being open to new opportunities, doing the right next thing, being honest, working hard, kind of the standard things, and then having eyes open to recognize somebody that could really be there to help me. And my parents from the very beginning, like a youth intern, Paul Kennis, right? He lived in my sister's room for like 2 years, right? Well, I thought that was kind of weird that they were giving up my sister's room for Paul to live there. Little did I know, the reason they were doing that was that I would probably listen to Paul because I wasn't listening to Mom and Dad, right? Yeah. So, whether it was my racquetball coach, whether it was, professors in high school and college and med school, I think that, I could name just dozens of people that were there along the way, but I don't think I found them almost as much as they pursued me. Yeah. Like they came toward me.
Yeah. What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid of all kinds of things. The kids have always been like, Dad, you're fearless. And I'm like, no, I'm far from fearless. I'm fearful of not using the gifts and resources and not taking advantage of what I've been given. I'm afraid of like wasting things or wasting time or resources. I think that'd be my probably one of my biggest fears is that I missed a conversation with somebody that could have helped them in some way or all the way to misusing, resources and that type of thing.
Have you always had that fear?
I don't know. I don't know when that came along, but it's certainly, I feel it, turning 50 last year, thinking about one of the kids made a poster. It said halfway to 100. And it's funny, and I still have it in my closet, and it's turned around because I didn't like seeing it every day.
Yeah.
But I can still see the back of it, and I know what it says on the other side, and it's a good reminder of we have a limited time. What are you doing with it? Are you just spending it? Are you really investing it into other people? Are you investing it into building things that matter? That's been the kind of the focus the last couple of years.
Yeah, I've been working through that with some of my friends because I kind of think that's like a practical interpretation of fear of the Lord is you have to have your fears in order. So you might be scared of, approaching the person or asking the favor or trying to make the sale or whatever the thing is in your life, big or small. But the question is, are you scared of the rejection, or are you scared of the actual good outcome that could come from this thing? Or are you scared of the, disapproval of man? It kind of sounds like you might have your fears a little bit more in order.
Yeah. And that, I think you're exactly right. And that sparked the thought of I think everybody should ask the question of if they're goal-oriented, they're driven towards success. What happens if you're wildly successful? What do you break? What falls apart whenever something that you think may even be unattainable, you're working so hard at it now, but if you're successful, what downstream negative effects does that have? And I think we've seen that with entrepreneurs all throughout time. Everybody set out to make this altruistic company that was going to do all these great things, and then the belly of the beast got uglier and uglier as it went.
So tell me about being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's been a new journey for me. 2020, I stepped down as being the program director, which I'd done at UAB for a decade. Loved it. And then in 2021, Sal Bronya, he had retired from Intuitive Surgical. He was the chief operating officer that had designed the Da Vinci surgical robot that I was using and teaching residents to use. And I was driving through Greenville, Alabama, and my phone rang, and I saw Sal Bronya on the call. And so I pulled off so I didn't lose service. And he said, "John, this is Sal. You may remember me from Intuitive." And I was like, "Sal, I know exactly who you are." And he said, "I'd like to start a company with you." And I just said, "Absolutely, I'm all in." And he said, "John, I didn't tell you what we're going to do." And I said, "It doesn't matter." And he's told that story. He told it on a healthcare podcast last year. And it was a good example. I was thankful that I was in a position where I could take a leap, and we could start a company, and had no idea what I would learn over the next 3 years, and it's been really exciting.
Yeah. Had you done any sort of business ventures before that?
I had never had. I mean, and as an academic surgeon, you don't even run your own business as a surgeon, right? UAB runs everything for me.
Yeah.
I don't have to fool with any of the billing, really hiring or anything. So, here I was, 47 years old, had really never done anything in business.
How did you go about learning how to run a business?
Yeah, I still read and listen. I read and listen to books on anything I get my hands on when it comes to business development. Reading about startups. One of our co-founders, Phil Bernowski, sent me the book, The Lean Startup, which is just a great entrepreneur first book. And then that's just gone into, a dozen rabbit holes of podcasts and reading news articles. And, if you look at my Google feed, it's all business and healthcare, entrepreneurial topics.
Yeah. What was that decision-making process like with Cassie? Because it sounds like you just kind of made the decision right then and there.
Well, I did. So it is that leap, and then I remember talking to Cassie that night and just told her, and she was immediately just overjoyed, excited. She knew I'd been kind of down. I didn't really want to give up the program director role. I see now it was a good thing, but I really wanted to do that for my whole career. And and so she was so excited that I was excited about something. And then as Sal and I worked over the next 6 months to kind of flesh out what this looked like, that's when the fear started to creep into Cassie, because she was like, what in the world? Like, you don't have extra time.
Yeah.
You're talking about telling UAB to pay you less money so that you can have more time to build a company that's not making any money.
Yeah.
So that was a big leap of faith for her. I remember one night she looked at me like I was completely crazy because I said, I really want us to look at this like I'm starting over my surgical residency.
Wow.
And so I want to do another 5 years. So the first year I'm going to be an intern, and I'm going to work just as hard as I did when I was an intern at MAYO. And she was like, okay. Like, she was just like, if that's what you think we're supposed to do next. And so financially it's challenged us. From a time standpoint, it's challenged us. I would say it's been great for our relationship. Almost back to your question, like, why do hard things? I thrive in conflict. I always have. Yeah. Right? You and I get in an argument in this podcast and think I'm going to stick with that fight because I think I'll know you better at the end of the fight.
Yeah.
And so in that conflict and that challenge of, finances are going to be less secure, time is going to be less secure, I'm going to travel more, all of those kind of things. Cassie was just amazingly flexible to give me the freedom to do that.
That's awesome. Does Cassie do well in conflict?
Cassie would avoid conflict at all costs.
Yeah, that's Claire shuts down. She's like, I don't. If I even raise my voice because I'm passionate about something, she doesn't want to have it. She's like, no, you're yelling at me. You're mad at me. Like, she doesn't want conflict. So yeah. That's funny.
I would say she and I have both grown a lot in the direction toward each other.
Yeah.
In that how I engage a conflict with her is really different after 27 years.
Yeah.
And then she feels much more free to just go ahead and have the conflict.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. But we have, that friendship and that base of trust. She fussed at me driving in the car yesterday because we had stopped on the side of the road to buy eggs, and I saw on the highway that there was nobody coming, so I just hit it in reverse and went like 200 yards down the road in reverse, which was a good plan, but she was complaining that I did that. She's like, John. And I was just like, hush, you don't know what I'm doing. Like, because I'd been thinking about what this traffic scenario was going to look like.
Yeah. And
she's kind to not be offended by me being like, hush, like right now, just be quiet. We're going to get out of this just fine.
Yeah.
So she trusts me well in that.
Yeah, that's sweet. What'd your kids think when you decided to start a business?
Oh, it's that's interesting. Yeah, so John, when he started his podcasting and he started sports casting and he needed like expensive headphones and all this kind of stuff, I felt like I was teaching him a lot about business, like make sure you make enough money to cover your expenses and stuff like that. So John's always looked at it, I think, a little bit like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so he'd always ask me, he's like, hey, Dad, you made any money?
Yeah.
With the girls, it was nice. It put me at home a little bit more. Hallie's senior year, certainly for the time Hallie was in high school, I was home more, so I wasn't going downtown as much. So that was good. Hallie she's probably been the least interested in it because I think she may be questioning, like, why is Dad leaving surgery? Like, if she's headed toward it, why would Dad be leaving it?
Yeah.
Or leaving the operating room side of it. So I think, and then Natalie, she really sees the potential big upside for it. If it goes well, if this goes, national, international, things like that, the opportunities to see that informed guide patients to the right surgeons, in a way that's never been done before.
Yeah.
And I think they all three get that. John's more the skeptic, Hallie's kind of questioning, and then I think Natalie's probably the most bought in.
Yeah. You kind of explained it briefly, but tell us what Informed does.
Yeah, so at Informed, we believe that the future of healthcare is outcomes based. And the most important part is to choose the right surgeon for a patient that needs a particular procedure. And there's all kinds of rating systems out there now, and they largely miss the most important thing, and that is the match between what the patient needs and what the surgeon is best at. Because you could go to a surgeon, and it's kind of like, to a man with a hammer, everything's a nail.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, hernia surgery is a great example of that. There's lots of different types of hernias, and there's tons of different ways to fix them. But if you only know one way to fix it, that's what you're going to offer to every patient, right? And so that patient, while they may be going to a high-volume surgeon, they may be going to a center of excellence, right, that's great at heart surgery. But they may not realize that they're getting the worst hernia surgeon there that may only know how to do it one way, or something like that. So by being able to build a data platform that's ingested information from 13 different sources, literally millions of claims records that we've been able to analyze across the country, we have created the ability to assess patient complexity as well as surgeon outcomes in an objective way that's undeniable and allows us to be able to connect that patient-surgeon match.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
It's absolutely incredible. And then the second effect of that is, like, who would buy that, right? So what we've done is we've sold it to large self-insured employers because they're the ones that are writing the check for, the employee that has the surgery. And we've shown that whenever we match the right patient to the right surgeon, they get the right operation, they reduce complications, and it's extremely important that they do it at the right facility, because different facilities have wildly different prices, that we can save $10,000 per surgery, and the patients have the right operation, and they're back to work in a fraction of the time compared to them just going to see kind of a random surgeon that their primary care doctor recommended, or maybe they go to their church or they play golf together or something like that. It's not based on that objective criteria to know how to match a patient to a single surgeon.
Yeah. What do you think about, this is a little bit changing gears, but the wellness industry and, like, the focus on longevity and all of that kind of stuff in medical world right now that seems to be on a big rise?
Yeah, I think in general, I'm a huge proponent of it because I think that I believe the world is more focused on being healthy now than they ever have been. Even though I went to medical school and I'm a medical doctor, I think the key really should be health. Just like UAB Medicine is our brand and our logo. But I've always been a little bit jealous of the University of Florida because I think they got it right because it's called UF Health.
Yeah.
And I think that emphasis is what we're seeing in the wellness industry. I think there are a lot of snake oil salesmen out there that are profiting from naive people they'll throw $100 a month at another supplement.
Yeah.
And I've seen patients break their bank accounts pursuing health and wellness and longevity at the expense, of spending $1,000 a month on their supplements and things like that. The other thing is that I do believe that you can make, like, health and wellness, you can make it a god. Like, you can truly worship it.
Yeah.
And it was so sad at MAYO whenever, I would see a 55-year-old guy. He's been running marathons. He's healthy. He's been going to see the doctor. He's been taking the right supplements. And so he's done, quote, everything right. And he's got pancreas cancer, right? He's going to die in 18 months.
Yeah.
It's already metastasized. It's beyond where we can resect it. And we're going to give him chemotherapy to hopefully get him to 18 months, but he might not even make a year. And he looked at me and said, this can't be happening. I did everything right. And that was not an uncommon occurrence. It still happens today. And so I feel like that patients are misled in this health and wellness emphasis that, if they do their cold plunge every morning,
Yeah.
or,
cold plunges are awesome.
Yeah. Peter Attia.
I like doing them, but
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. They watched Limitless with Chris Hemsworth. And,
yeah.
I loved that series. It was so good. But even in that series, I felt bad for Chris at the end because he seemed hopeless.
Yeah.
Like he gained the world, and for what?
Yeah.
So I do think that if that's where like kind of your identity is going to be wrapped up in, it's going to be just as empty as, anything else that's a vain pursuit.
Yeah. I don't want to ask you what your advice is for people to be healthy. I want to ask what you do to take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the thing that I focused on the most is just sleep. Like I said earlier, I don't love to get up early in the mornings. And I do recognize that in the times of my life when I've been the healthiest, I've been sleeping regularly and well. And the times whenever I have been sick or I have been gaining weight or I've not been able to run as well and things like that, it almost all comes back to sleep. So sleep is number one. Number two is eating and drinking in moderation of things. I don't do many things in moderation. Love to drive motorcycles fast. I love doing things in extreme. I'll tend to do that also, whether it's with food and drink and stuff like that. So when I'm doing anything in excess, then it'll wreck my health.
Yeah. What does your sleep routine look like?
Yeah, so I have an app, Sleep Cycle, sits on my phone, tells me that I need to prepare for bed at 9:30. So that's a kind of a constant reminder of like, hey, let's go ahead and think about it. And then I try to limit the use of my phone in the last hour and a half. One of the books I read had something to do with like you're a cave person, you wake up, you walk outside and you see the sun and you go about your day, and you might interact with 50 or 100 people, but then as the sun goes down, you're around a campfire, so kind of a warm light. You can tell in here, except for some of the extra lights, all the lighting in here is really warm.
Yeah.
The kids make fun of me because I dim the lights whenever I come home because I want it to be warm. I don't love the blue light and the phone and that kind of thing. And so so that's probably the main thing, is trying to limit that just to get ready. Oh, and the kids also make fun of me. And David, one of my best friends, he's like, what is it with you getting in the tub? But like I'll soak in the tub for 15 or 20 minutes, get nice and relaxed, and then I'll get in the bed and then try not to look at my phone much once I'm in the bed other than setting an alarm.
Yeah. What is time with friends like when you have a family, you're still a surgeon, you're starting a company, you're also older in life, so like I know that I at least see my friends' parents and my parents have fewer friends than I do because I am, married but no kids. What is that like for you?
Yeah, we've been blessed with some of the greatest friends, and it's why we're still here in Birmingham. It's why we haven't moved to pursue other jobs that might have been better opportunities, because we are so well supported, and we've been very intentional about that. With whenever I was running a lot, we would spend a fair bit of time, like the guys, we would text and we'd say we're going to meet here at 6:00, and we'd run and we'd come and hang out in the basement or in the pool. We try to have couples over for dinner regularly, so try to once or twice a week we try to have another couple here, or we try to go to their house for dinner. We're constantly asking people to meet us places. We're the couple that's like, we'll ask you like, hey, it's 5:30. Do you want to meet at Slice?
Yeah.
You know? So that's been important. The other part of like me and like having guy friends. So it's not just Cassie and I having couple friends, but like having guy friends is you have to schedule trips.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have to put it on the calendar. We haven't talked a lot about that. I do. I almost obsess over my calendar because if it doesn't get on the calendar, it's like Strava. If it's not on Strava, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't get on the calendar, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So that type of intentionality is really important. And where I make mistakes there is where like I overschedule myself.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, I did a bunch of cases in the OR on Friday. I had to give a talk in New Orleans on Saturday morning, and Natalie was running her first half marathon with Chloe, that next Sunday. And so that was too much for that weekend.
Yeah.
So I will overschedule myself sometimes, but I'd rather do that than look back and think, oh man, I wished I had done that. I wished I'd gotten to her race.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Do you do things for fun, or do you just like work and do hard things and run and like how do you spend time doing fun things on your own or with Cassie or?
Yeah, it's so funny when you ask that question. I was like, what a dumb question. Like all this is a blast.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, other things I do, tinkering around. I love tinkering around with old cars. Restored a Mustang, restoring a Defender now. Those things are fun. I love tinkering around with electronics and getting is really where that comes from. If Dad and I are together at the farm, there's nothing better than getting my dad excited about reloading rifle shells.
Yeah.
Like he's such a nerd and he's so good at it. And it's just a real fun thing to see him kind of geek out about it.
Yeah.
And so those are fun things.
Yeah. I like asking my friends this, but we're all in our 20s. I'm curious your answer to what is the dream?
Oh, it's a great question. Yeah, the dream is waking up every day and having important problems to solve for me. If I was to wake up one day and there wasn't an important problem to solve, that'd be a really sad day. Because I would just feel like I wasn't using the gifts and strengths that I've been given in problem solving. And I wouldn't say I'm the best problem solver, but it's a puzzle. And that's the dream, is just keep solving bigger and bigger puzzles.
Why do you think you see the world that way, as full of problems to be solved?
Yeah. I think it probably goes, I guess it goes back to all the people that have influenced me as a kid, surrounded by a ton of problem solvers. Think about my granddaddy, Fort Valley, Georgia. He was in charge of all the sales for Bluebird Bus Company. He could fix anything. He was like bigger than life in my mind. Whether it was a motorcycle, whether it was a bus, whether it was a relationship, whether it was a business deal. He could fix it. And he was rewarded for it. He was inducted into the Bluebird Hall of Fame and things like that. So I've seen a lot of people in my life solve important problems, many of them for me, because I created a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I was not an easy kid to raise.
Yeah.
My dad said that whenever I was in 8th grade, he said that he spent more time in the principal's office than in his own office.
That's funny.
And Brian Willett would attest to that was probably true. So that's a good thought, though.
Yeah. I've heard, I listen to Dr. Jordan Peterson a lot. He's a clinical psychologist from Canada. A lot of people associate him with like politics and stuff, but I just think he's like I think he might be the greatest public intellectual of our time. I just like hearing him think through problems and talk through problems with people because he understands the human brain so well. And something that he says, like his piece of advice for young people and trying to figure out their path, is look around you and figure out what problems bother you enough for you to want to go and solve them. And I think I view the world in a pretty similar way. How do you figure out what are the problems that you want to solve? Because that's kind of something I wrestle with. Is I see a ton of problems, but it's hard for me to determine which one to try and tackle. Right now, I think I'm in more of a season of like the problem is more local, like take care of my family, take care of my wife, take care of the things that are right in front of me.
Sure.
But there are some like bigger, more world scale, societal scale problems that I'd love to tackle that maybe will come a little further in the future. For you, how do you choose what problems to solve?
Yeah, I think that, whenever you're looking at any of these scenarios, kind of you're looking for problems to solve, you want to find something that's a real pain point, whether it's in an industry, whether it's for an individual, to really kind of drill into like, what's that look like? Whenever I was interviewing for the medical students going into our surgical residency program, one of the things that I looked for were people that had a vision to solve problems. But what didn't attract me to like want to recruit them to our program was whenever the problems that they were identifying were so outlandish and there were so many of them. Like they would rattle off like 12 global problems that they were going to fix.
Right.
Then I was like, this person is so scattered that they can't focus. So I think it comes back to kind of that concept of the next right thing. So what's like the closest pain point that you can solve? And then what can you learn from solving that problem that is then applicable to the next problem? I love those escape rooms and those kind of things you do with a team. And I think the best ones are when the solution to step 7 you would not have been able to have done if you hadn't learned from step 3.
Yeah.
That process taught you something that was then applicable later on. And I think that's a good analogy for how people should choose the problems that they tackle. And, it's a cliche to say, like, if you love what you do, you never have to go to work. But you really better love the problems because, like, the great parts about surgery, right? Walking out, talking to a family, letting them know that the cancer's gone.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But you also really better love sitting and holding a hand and telling them that you're not going to get it all. You better embrace that and be good at that problem, because it's not all blue skies in anything.
Yeah. What is success?
Oh, I think we've been talking about it all night. I think that I think success is taking advantage of the opportunities that you have and then maximizing that so that you even surprise yourself with how you were able to help someone, help a group, design something, launch something, build something. Like whenever you can be a part of something and then step back for a second and be like, wow, I didn't see that coming. That's better than I expected. Because that's when you know it wasn't about you, right? It was all part of the Lord's plan in your life, being diligent to use those resources. It was also about all of the collective ability of everybody that contributed. And I think that's, I think that's where you see the success really fully manifested.
Yeah. What have you learned about money as both like just a normal consumer person who worked a job, but also as a business owner?
Yeah. I keep coming back to my parents and that type of thing, but I do feel very fortunate that Because money to me is just a tool. I'm very fortunate that I've never been manipulated by money, because it can be it can be used so destructively. When there's a lot of it or when there's none of it, it can be used in very bad ways. And so I equate it to, it's almost like a shovel, right? It's just a tool. And if you need to dig a small hole, you need a small shovel, right? But if you need to move a lot of dirt, you just need a bigger tool. You need a bigger shovel. And so to me, money in itself doesn't have any innate value, right? And it's a social construct of like some way of being able to be able to have a tool that accomplishes a goal. And I don't think I'm taking any of it with me. I'm not trying to accumulate tons of it. There are tasks that I would like to have bigger tools to address.
Yeah.
Like with Informed. We have a plan for what a Series A funding round looks like, right? When that tool shows up, then we know the hole that we're going to go dig with that tool. Until that shows up, we can't go dig that hole, right? Same thing personally, So I think that's been a healthy way to look at it. My dad has said it more in a funny way. He just said money's just numbers on computer screens, which is true.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, in that it's just good to de-emphasize the power in it, because that shovel has no power, right? It's just sitting there, right? And so I think money is powerless, just like that shovel or tool is powerless, and it needs to, be used wisely, regardless of the size of the shovel.
Yeah. In your personal life, is there anything that you tend to spend a little bit too much money on or splurge on?
Yeah, for sure. Watches are probably one. Watches. I used to brag. I still brag about the fact I drive the oldest vehicle in the family.
Yeah.
Because I didn't ever want my kids to complain that they had the oldest one.
Yeah. That's funny.
But yeah, as I've accumulated a 1998 Defender and a 1991 Porsche and a 1971 Mustang, it's a bit excessive.
What Porsche do you have?
It's a 911 Carrera. Nice. It was my dad's. It was Mom got it for him on his 50th birthday, and we just finished restoring it.
That's awesome. I'm a huge Porsche guy. I don't know if I told you that before.
Yeah. They are the ultimate sports car.
Yeah. Well, John, I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
It's been a lot of fun.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. I think we'll have to do it again sometime.
I'd love it.
Yeah. Everyone listening, thank you so much. This has been word of mouth. And do you want to tell us about this background real quick? What's so special about where we're sitting right now?
Oh yeah. The former the folks that lived in our house before, he was the steel guitar player for the Zac Brown Band. And so when Barry and Claire Clements lived here, they used to always have this thing called the Pickin' Party, and the Zac Brown Band came, and so you can look up this fireplace and you can see it as their album art for one of their albums.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a good space. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's good.